The galaxy had been burning for 300 years. Two mighty empires fought each other across 10,000 star systems. The Dominion controlled the eastern spiral arm. Their ships were massive and their weapons could destroy planets. The Collective ruled the western territories. Their fleets numbered in the millions and their warriors knew no fear. Between them lay a graveyard of dead worlds and extinct species. Every attempt at peace had failed. The Galactic Council had tried 47 times to end the war. Neutral species had sent their best diplomats. Ancient artificial intelligences had calculated countless peace proposals. Nothing worked. The N hated each other with a fury that burned hotter than dying stars. Their hatred had become part of their identity. Neither side could imagine existence without the war. Then humanity discovered faster than light travel. Humans were new to the galaxy. They had barely left their solar system when they stumbled into the greatest conflict in known history. Most species expected humans to be destroyed. They were weak, short-lived, and possessed no natural weapons. Their technology was primitive compared to the great empires. The Galactic Council gave humanity 1 century before extinction. But humans surprised everyone. They did not choose sides. They did not flee. Instead, they started talking. Human merchants traded with both empires. Human doctors healed wounds on both sides of the conflict. Human engineers helped rebuild destroyed stations regardless of which flag flew above them. The great empires did not know what to make of these strange creatures who seemed incapable of understanding that they should pick a side and fight. Ambassador Sarah was born on a refugee ship fleeing an attack on a neutral station. Her parents died when she was 7. A medical officer saved her life. A trader raised her until she was 15. She spoke 12 languages before she reached adulthood. She understood both empires better than most beings in the galaxy. The Galactic Council chose her for an impossible mission. Sarah arrived at the neutral zone station called Last Hope. It floated in the empty space between empires where no weapons were allowed. The station was old and tired. Its walls bore the scars of 1,000 failed negotiations. Diplomats from 100 species had come here to end the war. All of them had failed. The delegation arrived first. High Commander led them. He was ancient by his species' standards. His scales had turned silver with age. He had personally destroyed 50 worlds. His hatred for the enemy was legendary. He looked at Sarah with contempt. To him, she was nothing more than an insect trying to stop a hurricane. The delegation came next. Fleet Mother commanded their group. She was young and fierce. Her people had elected her specifically because she refused to compromise. Her mandate was simple: total victory or eternal war. She did not even acknowledge Sarah's presence when she entered the negotiation chamber. The chamber itself was circular, sat on one side, sat on the other. Sarah's seat was in the middle, alone. The distance between the two sides seemed to stretch forever. 300 years of blood and fire filled that empty space. Sarah did not begin with formal greetings. She did not present peace proposals. She did not quote treaties or cite historical precedents. Instead, she did something no diplomat had ever done before. She asked them to tell her stories. High Commander was confused. He demanded to know what stories had to do with ending a war. Sarah explained simply. She wanted to understand, not the politics, not the territory disputes, not the resource conflicts. She wanted to understand the people who fought and died and suffered. She wanted to know why they hated. Fleet Mother laughed. She called Sarah naive and foolish. But Sarah did not respond with anger. She waited. She showed no impatience. She simply sat in her chair and waited for someone to speak. The silence stretched for hours. Finally, an old advisor began to talk. He told the story of his home world. He described the forests that once covered the northern continent. He spoke about the music his people made during harvest seasons. He remembered the taste of water from mountain springs that no longer existed, that had burned his world 40 years ago. Everything he loved was ash and memory. A warrior responded. She told her own story. Her family had lived on a space station for 7 generations. They were builders and engineers. They created beautiful things. Then the came. They destroyed the station without warning. Her entire family died in seconds. She was the only survivor because she had been on a supply run. More stories followed. Each side shared their pain. They spoke about children who never grew up. They remembered friends who died in battles that accomplished nothing. They described beautiful worlds that became wastelands. The chamber filled with grief that had been hidden behind hatred for centuries. Sarah listened to every word. She did not judge. She did not compare suffering. She did not declare one side's pain more valid than the other. She simply listened with complete attention. When someone cried, she offered comfort. When someone raged, she let them rage. She became a witness to 300 years of tragedy. Then she did something even more unexpected. She shared her own story. Sarah told them about being a child on a burning ship. She described the fear and confusion of those terrible hours. She spoke about the officer who carried her through flames. She talked about the trader who taught her to read and write. She explained how she had learned that kindness existed on both sides of the war. Evil existed on both sides too, just like every conflict in history. Her story created a bridge. High Commander remembered the officer Sarah mentioned. He had served under decades ago. The officer had died in battle 2 years after saving Sarah, had always considered him weak because he showed mercy to enemies. Now he wondered if that mercy had been strength all along. Fleet Mother recognized the trader who raised Sarah. He had been her uncle. She thought he had died in an attack. Learning that he had spent years caring for a human child changed something inside her. Her uncle had found a way to be kind even in the middle of war. Sarah built on this foundation carefully. She did not push for immediate peace. She did not demand concessions. Instead, she proposed something different. She suggested that both sides share their stories with each other, not through diplomats, not through official channels, through ordinary people. The proposal seemed ridiculous at first. How could stories end a war? How could personal narratives overcome centuries of institutional hatred? The advisors on both sides dismissed the idea as childish human sentimentality, but Sarah persisted. She argued that the war continued because both sides had forgotten that their enemies were people. They saw only monsters wearing enemy uniforms. Stories could remind them of truth. She convinced them to try a small experiment. 100 citizens would share their stories with 100 citizens. No soldiers, no politicians, just regular people who had suffered because of the war. They would meet virtually in safe spaces. They would talk about their lives, their losses, their hopes, nothing more. The experiment began 3 months later. At first, the conversations were hostile. Participants blamed each other for their suffering. They repeated propaganda they had heard their entire lives. They refused to see their enemies as anything other than evil. The experiment seemed destined to fail like everything else. But Sarah had understood something that other diplomats missed. Humans knew that connection took time. Other species expected quick results. Their diplomats measured success in signed treaties and territorial adjustments. Sarah measured success in small moments of understanding. A grandmother admitted that children probably loved their parents too. An engineer acknowledged that art was beautiful. Tiny cracks appeared in walls that had stood for centuries. Sarah expanded the program slowly. More participants joined. The conversations deepened. People started asking questions instead of making accusations. They discovered that their enemies had the same fears, the same dreams, the same desire for peace. The hatred did not disappear overnight, but it began to weaken. High Commander watched these conversations closely. He saw his own people changing. Warriors who had sworn eternal vengeance started questioning the purpose of the war. Citizens who had lost everything began to imagine futures without fighting. The transformation disturbed him deeply. He confronted Sarah privately, demanded to know what trick she was using, what technology influenced his people's minds, what manipulation technique had humans developed. Sarah's answer surprised him. She told him there was no trick. Humans simply believed that everyone wanted to be understood. Everyone wanted their pain acknowledged. Everyone wanted to matter. When people felt heard, they could start to heal. When they healed, they could let go of hatred. Spent days thinking about her words. He remembered the young warrior he had been before the war consumed his life. He had dreamed of exploring the galaxy and discovering new wonders. The war had stolen those dreams. It had turned him into a weapon. He had achieved great victories, but he had never known peace. His entire existence had been defined by an enemy he barely understood. Fleet Mother experienced similar revelations. Her political power depended on the war continuing. Peace threatened her position and her identity, but the stories she heard through Sarah's program haunted her. She recognized her own losses in pain. She saw her own hopes in dreams. The enemy had become people, and she could not make them into monsters again. The formal peace negotiations resumed after 1 year. Everything was different now. The delegates did not enter the chamber as enemies. They came as beings who had shared grief and glimpsed each other's humanity. The hatred had not vanished, but it no longer controlled them. They could see past it to the possibility of something better. Sarah guided them through difficult conversations. She helped them find common ground where none had existed before. She taught them human techniques for managing conflict, active listening, empathy exercises, acknowledgement of harm, commitment to change. These methods seemed simple to humans who had practiced them for thousands of years. To the end, they were revolutionary. The Treaty of Last Hope was signed 18 months after Sarah's arrival. The war did not end immediately. 3 centuries of conflict could not be erased with one document, but the killing stopped. The borders opened. Aid flowed to devastated worlds. Refugees returned to ancestral homes. Children grew up without learning to hate their neighbors. The galaxy began to heal. Sarah became a legend. Other species studied her methods. They tried to understand how a single human diplomat accomplished what thousands of others had failed to achieve. Many concluded that humans possessed some secret power. Perhaps their short gave them special urgency. Perhaps their emotional nature allowed deeper connection. Perhaps their history of endless internal conflicts had taught them something valuable. Sarah herself offered a simpler explanation. Humans believed in stories. They knew that every person was a story waiting to be told. They understood that enemies were just people whose stories remained unknown. Peace became possible when people listened to each other instead of fighting. This was not alien wisdom. It was basic human knowledge that the galaxy had forgotten. The end built a memorial together. It stood at the center of the station called Last Hope. The memorial contained millions of stories from both sides. Visitors could hear voices of the dead speaking about their lives. The memorial reminded everyone that war destroyed stories. Peace allowed new stories to be written. Ambassador Sarah retired to a small planet on the border between former enemies. She spent her remaining years teaching young diplomats from every species. Her lessons were simple but powerful. Listen first. Judge slowly. Remember that your enemy has a story too. These human principles spread across the galaxy. Humanity had given the stars a gift beyond technology or resources. They had shared their understanding of connection. They had demonstrated that even the deepest hatred could be transformed through patience and empathy. They had proven that stories could end wars. The galaxy would never forget.